the waitlist note that blew our cover. I build the back end for a waitlist app that makes restaurants feel like they can control chaos. When a host types a name, the system finds history, allergies, favorite corner, whether they prefer the tables that forgive elbows. We even surface small human scraps, like the lemon tart. Arrives late but tips like a confession. Every note becomes memory. I am paid to make sure the remembering is kind. That's why the note undid me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate in exactly the way I didn't want it to be. It was 3:27 on a slow Tuesday when I opened a test environment to triage a sync bug. Names and notes scrolled by in a familiar blur until one line stopped everything the way a freight train stops a breath. VIP hold if possible. 2 top. Corner. He is not her husband. The guest name was Ravenna. You don't forget a name like that. She came into my life the way some songs arrive, irritating at first, then inevitable. She runs a small gallery that makes rich people weep over rusted metal and photographs where nothing is centered. We met when my friend Liam dragged me to an opening, and then abandoned me to go flirt with a woman who could afford it. Ravenna stood by a piece of steel that looked like a prayer had been folded into armor and asked what I did. I told her I built software that makes hosts kinder liars. She laughed and said, "Then you know something about art." I was engaged to Mara. The kind of engaged that comes with a deposit and a seating chart, and a set of parents who like to pretend a rehearsal dinner is more important than mercy. Mara is an architect who can look at a room and name the exact inch where light gives up. She keeps a pencil behind her ear like other people keep hope. Ravenna and I were not careful. We were deliberate. We started as a pair of people who both believed we were too smart for cliché. A drink after a show, the kind where the bartender recognizes the hunger in your voice and pours curiosity into the glass. A walk on a street that isn't meant for walking but became theater because we decided to narrate it. We didn't write each other into lies. We wrote each other into the margins that make lies legible. The first time I touched her like a fact was in a bookshop with rugs that insisted on slowing your feet. She handed me a monograph of an artist I pretend to know, and the corner of it grazed my knuckles and then her fingers stayed. We didn't kiss there. We learned the geometry of an almost kiss so well that when we finally did it, behind the old movie house while the city pretended not to watch, it felt like a sequel we'd already memorized. We kept it specific, not graphic. Her mouth tasted like blood orange, and the kind of wine waiters pour for themselves after the last table leaves. My hand learned the slope of her shoulder, that humble topography where honesty sits. We stopped where people with cameras would still call us friends. We favored a place called Bleeker's, a room with just enough light to flatter confession. The host, a woman named Sal with a sleeve of ink that made men straighten their backs, had learned our names and our desire to be seated where the room couldn't overhear us. I built tools that made her work easier. She built grace where there should have been rules. When the app told her my account had superadmin, she raised an eyebrow and wrote a note anyway. Likes the corner with the mirror, the one that catches them gentler. And then weeks later, some new host wrote the other line. He is not her husband. Clean. Helpful. A kindness disguised as surveillance. It stared at me from my own system like a mirror I hadn't given permission. I could have deleted it and gone to fix the bug that was supposed to be my job. Instead, I did the thing people like me always do before we swear off doing it again. I clicked into the ticket that explained the context. Saturday, 8:12 p.m. busy service. Ravenna added to waitlist under Ravenna R. Whisper asked for corner. Host recognized my name from Chit. Entered note for continuity. Auto-synced. A smiling face sticker at the bottom suggested no malice, just order. I minimized the window and stared at the office ceiling tiles until my eyes pretended the grid was new. When I stood to take a walk, My knees made the sound a chair makes when it forgives weight. Outside, I could smell the kind of cold that tells on you. I called Ravenna and hung up before the first ring. I called Mara and let it ring until her voicemail practiced tenderness. At home, the apartment looked like a list of good decisions that had lost their whistle. Mara sat on the floor surrounded by paper, plans for a house someone else would live in. She looks happiest when a room is still imaginary. She touched the space beside her and I sat, 2 inches away because that's the distance at which honesty can still be a wish. "You're thinking too loudly," she said, not looking up. "I read a sentence I wasn't supposed to," I said. There was no universe where the rest of that confession had a map. "About you or about something we're pretending isn't ours?" she asked. Mara's intelligence is not polite. It is a light no window can argue with. "Both," I said. She put down her pencil and turned her mouth toward mine, soft and practiced and full of faith that I could still deserve it. I kissed her back the way a man kisses the life he is supposed to keep, carefully, competently, grateful and not quite grateful enough. When she went to the kitchen to make tea, I stared at the door and thought about corners and mirrors. Ravenna texted, "Come here." The impulse landed in my body like a thrown key. I typed, "Not tonight," she wrote, "then say something useful." I said, "They wrote it down." She replied with a single period and somehow it sounded like bravery. We met the next afternoon at Bleeker's because irony was cheaper than therapy. Sal was on. She slid us into our corner with the mirror and rested her hand on the table the way women do when they want to warn you without making you defensive. "The boys were chatty on Saturday," she said low. "I resolved it, but you should know we're a room, not a rumor." "You tried," Ravenna said, warm, generous, the kind of woman who does not confuse crisis with flirting. "I did," Sal said, then drifted away like someone who understands discretion isn't silence, it's choreography. We ate the kind of pasta that makes forgiveness feel like an economy. Ravenna put her foot on mine beneath the table, a small pressure that turned the room specific. She said, "We always knew some part of this wouldn't belong to us." I said, "I thought I could keep the parts I built." She smiled with just the left side of her mouth. "That's your problem," she said. "You think building is owning." We walked after, not touching because the light had decided to be unforgiving. She led me 3 blocks to a door that used to be varnish and now pretended to be history. Up one flight, she unlocked a studio with high windows and a mattress on the floor that made no apologies. It was not a sex room. It was a place where artists make sentences out of objects. We didn't close the curtains. We didn't need to. The city already believed we were practicing grief. She unbuttoned my shirt to the place where hair gives up pretending, and then she stopped and put her palm flat on my sternum like a handwritten warning. I kissed the heel of her hand and then her wrist and then the side of her throat where names lose their courage. Her sweater slid, not off, just aside, enough for my mouth to remember its work. We stayed on the right side of what polite audiences call suggestion. Soft gasp, breath that edits itself, the arc of a back that says, "Let's be specific." When she pressed her fingers under my jaw, I let the anger leave in an exhale. We stopped together, a muscle we had built out of respect and cowardice. "Tell me a true thing," she said, still close enough that truth would arrive faster than anything else. "I keep trying to be a good man in the wrong story," I said. She smiled like someone getting the joke. "Then change the story," she said, "not the man." I wanted that to be permission. It was. It was an assignment. That night I opened a terminal and wrote the patch I had been avoiding for months, the one that would keep notes about infidelity, accusation, and similar from persisting between venues unless a manager approved them. A small safeguard that would protect people from hosts with too much enthusiasm for pattern recognition. I wrote tests. I shipped the fix. I added a line to the internal playbook that said the app is a memory, not a witness. My hands did their work with an ease that made me more ashamed of the parts of me that were slower. Mara found me sleepless at 4 a.m., the light from the laptop painting my worst features calmer than they were. She closed the computer gently and sat on my lap like we were still young and unapologetic. "You're carrying a room full of other people's secrets around inside one chest," she said. "Leave some behind." "I think I have to leave one behind for real," I said. The sentence kept all our nouns safe while admitting what it was. "Is she the reason the corners of your mouth are happier when you're supposed to be listening to me?" she asked. There was no accusation in it, only inventory. "She is the part of me that learned to want something after I already had a definition," I said. "Then pick," she said. "Not out of guilt, out of honesty. Stay or go, but stop making the couch a defendant." I slept 2 hours and woke like a man who had already been found out by whatever god he still feared. At noon I wrote Ravenna, "I choose what I promised." She wrote back before the dots were done dancing, "Good, be that man. Then, I will be the woman who doesn't ask you to forget." Mara and I postponed the wedding under the safe pretense of money and parents and calendars. The real reason was less dramatic. We needed the kind of boredom that doesn't humiliate you. We learned to take long walks where we didn't solve anything. We moved the bed so morning light hit us at kinder angles. We touched more and apologized less, and didn't try to make desire behave like a slogan. In the kitchen, I stood behind her and put my palm at her waist because my body remembers how to prove a point without words. She leaned back with a small sound that felt like a door opening correctly. Ravenna kept her studio and her black sweater and the soft knife of her voice. Sometimes I'd pass the gallery and catch a glimpse of her through glass, speaking to a collector with a practiced tenderness that never felt dishonest. She sent one text every month, never a question, always a sentence that belonged to both of us. The last one said, "Thank you for protecting the room even when you aren't in it." I wrote, "Thank you for leaving the light on long enough for me to find the door." The patch I shipped rerouted a trickle of small cruelties. Notes got kinder. Hosts learned to write less and notice more. Bleakers kept our corner but lost the sentence about husbands. Sal winked when she saw me with Mara and pretended not to have memory outside the app. Sometimes I think about the young host with the helpful fingers and the world he thought he was improving, and I hope he finds the version of discretion that keeps people human. The night Mara and I put our deposit back down, we didn't celebrate with anything expensive. We ordered noodles from the place that tastes like mercy and sat on the floor with our backs against the couch, knees touching because chairs feel ceremonial and we were practicing ordinary. I told her about the patch. She told me about a staircase that wants to exist. We laughed at the same wrong time and then at our laughing, which is the oldest proof I know that a room is patient with us. Later, when the city was finally tired enough to deserve sleep, I lay awake and thought about corners and mirrors, and the way mirrors are only useful if you believe they can change the truth they reflect. I pressed my face into Mara's shoulder, where skin forgets to be future, and remembered a line Ravenna had said to me once in a doorway when the world felt unfixable. She had pressed her thumb just below my throat and said, "Make the room honest, and the body will follow." I am trying. When I walk into Bleeker's now, I don't check the screen behind the host's stand. I look for the table that forgives elbows and the person across from me who keeps pencils behind her ear. We order the tart I used to pretend was too sweet. We talk about small things that keep us large. When I pay, I tip like a confession. And when we stand to leave, I catch our reflection in the mirror that knows everything and tells no one. And I nod like a man who built a small fix and decided it was a start.